in a game. 20.
Swung on and driven to deep left. And a pass. Down for Yankees win. Yankees win. Bernie Williams homers deep in the left field seat to lead off the 11th inning at a 1-run finish. And the Yankees beat the Orioles 5-4 to win Game 1 of the American League Championship Series. Burn, baby, burn. He's done it again.
Deep left. There it goes. Stepping into history. He's done it. He has done it. 62. Aaron Judge is the American League single-season home run leader. The AL King. Case closed.
What is going on, baseball fans? Jeremy Laracuente here for the Baseball Banter Broadcast. And as you saw in the open, we are continuing our series here, looking at and examining the state of the franchise. From championship glory to rebuilding years, every team has a story. And on this series, exclusive to the Baseball Banter Broadcast, we examine and break down the past, present, and future of all 30 major league teams, analyzing roster moves, front office decision, and what lies ahead. As you can tell by the hat that I'm wearing, today we are discussing the San Diego Padres with my special guests from their very own podcast, the PadFathers podcast, Ryan and Tom. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing good, man. Appreciate you having us on. I was just gonna say, first of all, you got me ready to run through a brick wall after that intro. That was some good stuff there. But yeah, good stuff. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely, guys. Absolutely. We got to get the source, straight from the horse's mouth, as the saying says, discussing what is, in my opinion, one of the more entertaining teams in baseball. So as we get into it, I just want gut reactions, how you feel coming off of the 2024 season, heading into 25, just kind of gut reactions. What are your thoughts on the Padres?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first and Tom, you can follow up. But this has been a bit of a rough offseason for us, definitely. I think that's a shared sentiment amongst Padre fans. Main being is that the Dodgers have, being our main rivals, have not only strengthened and seemed to really push forward since winning the World Series last year, but they've even snagged a couple of our key guys from the 24 campaign. So overall, it hasn't felt great. Ownership issue is definitely lingering. I know that's been out in the media. Not really a clear communication, clear-cut path going forward for 2025. But with that being said, if we're really breaking it down from where we were a year ago, right, leading into spring training versus where we are now roster-wise, I'd say we're probably in a better spot, albeit with all the drama and, lack of moves happening here in the offseason. So, just a few examples going into last year, we had Profar coming back on a prove-it deal. Jackson Merrill became our starting star center fielder, and he had never even played the position in his life, not even high school, little league. It was his first time taking reps. So, when Grisham went with Soto over to the Yankees, there was no clear-cut center fielder for us there. Manny was coming off of a really big elbow surgery that a lot of people forget about. He didn't even start playing third until, halfway through May last year. So there's a lot of question marks going into it. So if we're comparing the two, I think we're probably in a better spot now than we were a year ago, but it doesn't necessarily feel that way based off of the lack of traction that we've had in signing free agents and making some trades here. So
yeah, I'd definitely say I'm excited. It's been way too long of an off season. Obviously, we've seen what's happened with the Padres ownership and how we haven't really been signing guys like we have in the past couple of years. But we've still got some really big names, and hopefully the Petco Park crowd can turn out again. And I think it's safe to say I'm just really excited to see this team back on the field. We got some great guys. Obviously, I'm so excited to see Jackson Merrill just for starters to get back on the field. There are obviously some gaps that we're looking at, but yeah, I'm excited.
Definitely. Like I said, I think that it's a very exciting team. Even with all the offseason drama you guys alluded to with like the ownership battle and all that stuff, I still think this is one of the best, teams in baseball going into the 2025 campaign. Now, you did talk about the kind of the lack of moves. Some of the things that were done was a lot of minor league signings with big league spring training invites. Jason Hayward, Gavin Sheets, Martin Maldonado, Nico Goodrum, Mike Broussard. You guys did pick up Jason Hayward, Connor Joe, Elias Diaz, and you made a trade with the White Sox with Ron Marinaccio. So that's some of the moves that were kind of the bigger things on MLB.com. Of those moves, what do you think is going to be the most impactful one?
Yeah, I mean, right now, probably the most impactful is going to be one of the two between Connor Joe and Jason Hayward, just because there's some big shoes to fill from Profar, right? He had an insanely good overachieving season last year in left field. So filling those boots is going to be tough. So hopefully a platoon or one of the two can really go forward. And then on top of that, Gavin Sheets is probably the one that I'm most excited about that could potentially make the roster in terms of, just being a good solid bench piece, lefty bat, has some pop. That was probably one of our weak points last year. So those are the three that kind of stood out to me. The fact that those are the three that stood out to me kind of tells you that we've had such a quiet offseason, and AJ's probably not done. I don't think he's ever done really, but and then, yeah, I mean, the last one there, Diaz, I don't know how much of an impact he's going to have, but he's going to be probably our starting catcher. At the very least, he's going to be platooning with Campusano. So, yeah, those are really the top four to me that kind of stood out. But really, yeah, I think that left field position, we've quote unquote addressed it. We'll see if it continues to be a platoon throughout the year, or if someone really kind of snags that everyday starting role.
For me, I'd say, yeah, Jason Hayward and Connor Joe, obviously the big ones. Connor Joe, San Diego kid, we know what they can do in San Diego. For example, Joe Musgrove. Elias Diaz, I'm excited about. Obviously, he's been on this Padres team now for a couple months, so he's kind of, I feel like he's probably settled down now. He knows what he's doing. He knows what's expected of him. I'm hoping, obviously, we didn't acquire him, but Campusano, I'm hoping he can also get his power back, what he can be like. But yeah, Hayward and Connor Joe, we needed a left fielder. If it wasn't Tirso or Naylor, it's going to be one of those two. So yeah, they're I think the big three of the off season. Sad it isn't a $300 million signing, but you can't have everything, can you?
Yeah, I think Gavin Sheets, like you said, I think is an interesting one. I think that, he's a guy that was a top prospect at one point and, looked at to be one of the cornerstone pieces for the White Sox franchise. And, now he's kind of, have to go out there and prove it. I think that he could be a big bat if he kind of finds that stroke. So I think that could be an underrated move for you guys as well, especially with the hole in left field that you're trying to plug in and fill. So that's definitely an interesting guy for sure. Now, when you look at the way the team is set up right now, you mentioned, San Diego kid and Joe Musgrove. We want to look at the injuries, and on MLB.com, you got a couple of different guys that are facing with some injuries. Obviously, Joe Musgrove is kind of a non-factor with the Tommy John surgery. Luis Ariz underwent thumb surgery this offseason, and Johnny Burrito is dealing with an elbow sprain. So as far as the injuries for the team, kind of what's the biggest question mark, the biggest concern, and if there's any other injuries that could be jumping to the forefront for you guys?
Yeah, I think just to address Ariz first, he should be fine to go for spring training. He was playing through a torn ligament in his thumb basically since May. So a couple weeks after we got him in the deal with the Marlins last year. So to finish off as the batting champion with one good thumb, I mean, just goes to show you how good of a pure contact hitter that he is. I know he definitely ruffles a lot of feathers in terms of WAR and how useful and valuable he is for a roster. But just in terms of straight average, real old school, a very, very light Tony Gwynn from the hitting side, not fielding or base running. I've gotten some stick there for even making that comparison in the past. But the real big one, obviously the main one is Joe Musgrove. When he went down against the Braves, I was actually at that game at Petco in the playoffs, and it seemed like that was the tipping point to where, you know, if we were going to make a run in the postseason, it kind of felt like he was the X factor, right? He had been battling that all of last season. So, you know, in hindsight, he tried to battle it out. He ended up, you know, probably should have gotten it the year before, but you know, that's where we're at now. So that's the one that stings the most. He's, like you said, he's not going to be a factor here at all in the 2025 season. So naturally, that is one of the main concerns, or one of the main areas that the Padres still need to address in the starting rotation. We really have a good core three with King, Cease, and Darvish, and then that 4-5 spot's kind of up for grabs. I think it's going to be a combination of who's going to win it in spring training, and then, you know, like we were saying before, AJ's really never done. I wouldn't be surprised if he brings in an arm or two before the season starts to address those areas of concern, especially if the battle in spring training is a battle of, you know, number and 6-7 types to fill that 4-5 spot. So yeah, Joe Musgrove definitely the biggest concern and created the biggest hole for our roster. Luckily, everyone else seems to be pretty healthy going into it. Fernando seems healthy. Manny said that he's completely healed up. No injury. I mean, yeah, like you said, Arise, like we addressed, that should be all good to go come spring training here in a week or two.
Yeah, last season we definitely saw some, you know, long-standing injuries for some players. Obviously, Arise, like you said, Machado, like you said, Tatis, obviously deals with a lot of injuries. But yeah, Musgrove's going to be a lethal injury, and especially with us, you know, we need to bring in another starting pitcher, so it seems. But yeah, I think, like, as long as we can potentially make a signing or a trade for a starting pitcher to kind of like replace Musgrove for this season, I think we'll be okay. But yeah, I think the guys in the main lineup, Manny, Luis, I think I hope they'll all be fine coming into the season.
Yeah, I think that, you know, like you guys said, pitching is going to be the biggest thing. We know that it's a war of attrition throughout the course of the regular season. You know, and with what you guys have, especially in a short series with King and Cease and Darvish, you know, you can get through a short series that way. But having that fourth guy, you know, especially throughout the course of the regular season for that grind, is really something that you are going to be missing out on. I think that there are some interesting candidates, and we'll get more into the pitching in a little bit, but I think there are some interesting guys that could be battling for that 4th and 5th spot. But I do agree with you guys that picking up another starter seems like an AJ Preller kind of move, and that it's just kind of waiting for this whole ownership battle to kind of figure itself out to see where the money's actually coming from. So I think that AJ's never done, like you said. You know, him and Jerry DiPoto are the most active GMs in the sport. So they're never done. So for sure, I think something's going to be coming, whether more than likely coming via trade at this point, I would say, rather than anybody picking up, you know, a big name that's out there. You know, I don't see them going after a guy like Nick Pivetta, who has, you know, the qualifying offer attached to him. So who's in that pick? I think that's going to be a big thing for a lot of teams right now. So I think that it'll probably be in the trade lineup, but for sure, definitely pitching is going to be something that has to be paid attention to for you guys. Now, one of the other things that we like to look at on this series is the X factor for the season. You know, so going into 2025, who do you believe the X factor for the Padres' success is going to be, and what do you think that translates to in terms of success?
Yeah, I'll start with this one. I kind of broke it up into offense and pitching. I think that there's a couple obvious ones and a couple not so obvious ones. So for me, it was really a toss-up between Fernando Tatis Jr. and Jackson Merrill. I think you could slot either of those two in there. Reason being for Merrill, you know, sophomore season, he proved that, you know, nothing really fazed him, especially come post-April when he had his real only true slump of the year and just looked like a veteran out there, honestly, from in the field, behind the dish, on the base paths. So we're expecting some big things for him, being a real big glue guy out there in center, playing gold glove level caliber defense, which is incredible to even think that that's a possibility. But for me, if I had to pick one between the two, I think Fernando is the X factor in this team. He is an MVP type caliber player. If he can play 162, if he can play 150, 155, if Shohei is playing the majority of the season, then more often than not, obviously that MVP is going to go to him. But Fernando has the tools. He's a 5-tool player. He's still pretty young. He's electric on the base pass. Still, he's got that cannon of an arm out in right field. Platinum glove winner out there in his first season there. He can bounce around the diamond. He's got probably the most raw power on the team. So he's definitely our most talented player all around on offense, defense, and then on the base path. So for me, offensively, X factor is going to be Fernando. Pitching, two guys I want to name that aren't so obvious. Brian Hoeing, I think, has a potential to be a very, very important piece this year. We have a few more years of control from him. He came over as kind of a quote unquote throw-in with the Tanner Scott deal with the Marlins at the trade deadline last year. So definitely has starter potential. So for me, the X factor for him, if he can win that 4 or 5 spot in the roster, I think that's kind of a sneaky one that not a lot of people outside of Padre fans or the organization are really looking at. And then in the bullpen, Sean Reynolds is a guy for me that could definitely be an X factor for that bullpen. He finished the year with absolutely electric stuff. There's some advanced metrics there. I think it's just stuff plus, or I don't know the exact metric, but he was top 20 overall based off of the amount of limited innings that he did have for the Padres. But he looks like a future, mid to back end starter, if not a future closer in baseball. Huge frame, 6'6", 6'7" type guy. Also came from the Marlins. We love to do a lot of deals with the Marlins, apparently. So yeah, he has electric stuff. So those are probably the two guys, both in potentially starting rotation or in relief, that I think could be X factors for this team that are kind of a little bit more sneaky under the radar.
I mean, as long as Merrill doesn't go through that sophomore slump, I think he's going to 100% be the X factor. Obviously, you got the older guys, Machado, who will help these younger guys to get themselves through the season. But I definitely think it's going to be Jackson Merrill. Hopefully, we've seen it. We've seen it all over Major League Baseball. But I think that he powers through. He powers through anything that comes in his way. He's more than determined to get his team over the finishing line. He wants a World Series, and that's true to fact. But I'm going to go on the same way as Ryan here with pitching. 100% Michael King. I think under Ruben Yabler, he's been unbelievable. He's been great. Hopefully nothing gets in his way with injury wise, but last season, and with the whole arbitration case as well, you can tell he's determined to play for this team and play well for this team. So I'm definitely excited to see King pitch this season as a starter.
Absolutely. So similar to you, Ryan, I had Fernando as the X factor for the Padres in 25. I think it's a make or break season for him. We haven't seen the same kind of offensive output since his PED suspension, and I think that it's time where, we really see the real Fernando Tatis Jr. offensively. We've seen what he's capable of on the defensive side of the ball. Absolutely incredible transition from shortstop to the outfield. And I think that there is that MVP level, that, real superstar caliber offense in that bat. I think he's dynamic as anybody in baseball. And I think that there is that talent in there. I think that there's more than just, the questions about whether or not it was all PD related. I don't think that it was. So I think that this is a big year for him to kind of cement himself amongst that upper echelon of MVP caliber talent year in and year out. So I agree with you. I think that it's definitely Tatis Jr. for me in terms of the X factor for San Diego this year. Now, when we look at, some of the future of this team, and we look at the top prospect, MLB.com has Ethan Salas as your top prospect in the the Padres ranking. So what can you tell us about him, and what are your thoughts on where he could end up for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, just on the local radio show on Ben and Woods this morning, the question popped up: could Ethan Salas make the opening day roster? He's an 18-year-old kid that talks as if he's 40. The very first thing I noticed about the guy, we signed him when he was 16 years old, I believe, out of Venezuela. I think he's the same nationality as Luis Arraez, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, 16 years old, came over. The first interview that I heard from him, I was just absolutely blown out of the water with his maturity, and then also just his ability to speak English. So many people nowadays just do not even think about how they just expect it, right? Like, you come to MLB, you're going to be speaking English. He spoke it as if he had been living here his entire 16-year career, or 16 years that he was alive. So sounds like he had a 16-year career already based off of the interviews that we've seen from him. So that was the very first thing that kind of blew me away right off the bat. Number two, he was the top international prospect when we signed him a couple years ago. Behind the dish, the kid is absolutely nails. He always is, top one, top two in pop time, whether that was in spring ball or last year in the minor leagues as well. So defensively, he's going to be there. In terms of offense, he had a little bit of a struggle in A-ball last year, adjusting to A-ball. So, if his bat can come around, he absolutely can fulfill that top prospect status. For me, the guy that I am personally most excited about is Leo DeVries. He is a potential superstar shortstop that's coming up. I think that, same thing last year. He was the top international prospect that was signed in the 2023 or 2024 class. So for me, that's probably my number one. And then I'd have Ethan Salas number two, just because he did have a little bit of a tough year last year with the wood. But overall, both guys, I mean, it's them two, and then it's kind of a cliff from there in terms of where we're at farm system wise. So, in another year or two, AJ's going to have that system just fully packed again, like he always does. But yeah, for those two are definitely the most exciting. And then, yeah, Salas can definitely, again, being a starting shortstop at the major league level this year, I don't think is necessarily a good idea, nor is it that realistic, even with how thin we are at the catcher position. But just the fact that people are having that conversation just goes to show you the natural talent that he has to even have the confidence to call a game at that level. So that's kind of my 2 cents there.
Yeah, I think with Ethan Salas is, he obviously had that off season last season, but when you come into the minor leagues as a 16-year-old, I think you're always going to be good. You've always got a massive amount of talent on you, and we know what AJ Preller's like. He's an unbelievable scout. So I don't think I can see him coming in this next season, just because of how we performed last season. Behind the dish, he's unbelievable, but behind the plate, was he all that? But yeah, DeVries again, coming in as a young guy. Preller, we know what he's capable of. So I think another shortstop, could it work out? Could it not? But we saw what happened with Merrill. So I think DeVries will really work out, and yeah, I'm excited to see what Salas can do in the future now.
DeVries' nickname real quick too, El Mutante, so that tells you how he's kind of looked upon amongst his peers. But
yeah, I mean, you guys have a team full of shortstops, so
AJ loves his shortstops.
So now, as we look again to the future of this squad, and specifically in 2025, I want to know, what is the boldest prediction that you have for the Padres in this upcoming season?
Yeah, apparently I'm not very good at narrowing it down to one. Can't make up my mind. But I have two for you. Kind of going back to what Tom said for his X Factor, I think Michael King is going to win the Cy Young Award for the NL this year as a bold prediction. Again, might not happen. But as bold prediction, I think he absolutely has the stuff to finish as the Cy Young Award winner for the National League. And I would say Fernando Tatis Jr. Finishes second in the MVP voting behind Shohei. Those are my two kind of bold predictions there. As long as, just went over this, but as long as Fernando can play 150, 155, and then, reach that level of potential that he's shown, especially just most recently in this 2024 postseason, then he has the stuff to be, right there, top 3, top 2. But bold prediction, I'd say top 2 in the MVP, assuming that Shohei has a healthy season.
Right.
So this is very bold, and I probably will get flamed for this a bit. But I think our middle infield is going to have a bit of a breakout year with Cronenworth and Bogarts. In the past they've both proven themselves. I think Cronenworth obviously a lot less, but let's go on to Cronenworth here. He's definitely capable of a lot. I think he's got the power, he's got the contact, and he can be a great defender as well. And if he really puts them all in together, he can be great. I've said this every year. I absolutely love the guy, but I really think he can be great. And then Bogarts, he's getting a bit old now, but I think he's probably more determined than ever with this off season now to get himself high up in the ranks. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I think that this is a very entertaining and interesting team going into this year. Even with all of the offseason drama with ownership and not really spending any kind of money, I think that this team definitely has the makings of a postseason caliber team, potentially a World Series caliber team. And so my bold prediction, and this to me is along the lines of AJ Preller's kind of moves, is that you trade Dylan Cease, but you get back a reliable starter as well as an offensive piece for your outfield. Because I think that even with the guys that you acquired so far this offseason for that left field hole, I think that it's still going to end up being somewhat of a hole throughout the season. And I think that he's going to use the strength that he has in that rotation with the, especially upcoming free agency of Dylan Cease, to kind of transition that off to, again, guys with more control, similar to what happened with the Marlins deal last year. And with Tanner Scott, he was coming up to be a free agent, but you got Hoeing in that deal as well. So I think it's going to be something similar to that as well when it comes to AJ Preller.
I like it.
Now, looking at the organization and kind of what is your belief as the biggest question mark going into the 2025 campaign?
Yeah, I think the most immediate question is the opening day roster, right? So just kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier in the pod. Last year at this point in time, the roster from February 11th, 2024 looked much different than April 1st, looked much different than May 15th after we acquired Arise, and it looked much different compared to September 1st, right? So the theme is definitely AJ's, like we said, he's never asleep. He does not stop moving. He does not stop even considering moves on pretty much anyone. So that's the most immediate question right now. Again, like we said, we filled that left field spot. Like you mentioned, I don't know if that's going to have the same level of productivity. Interestingly enough, both Connor Joe and Jason Hayward got the exact same contract that Profar did last year. So they're really trying to have that MO this offseason of really low risk, high reward type of guys. We'll see if that pays off. But yeah, opening day roster, especially with the like we said, left field, and then filling that rotation. Our bullpen is definitely in a better spot compared to it was at this point last year. And towards the tail end of the year and into the postseason, our bullpen had major plaudits in terms of being one of the best in all of the majors. That was not the case until the trade deadline. It was basically Robert Suarez going 3, 4, 5 outs whenever he could. And then just a bunch of inconsistency amongst the other guys there. So once we got Jason Adam, once we got Tanner Scott and Brian Hoeing to just, eat up some innings, especially because we had some issues last year too at the back end of our starting rotation. That's when we really started to see it click. So bullpen is in a much better spot. Position wise, I'd say that we're not in as good of a spot. But with that being said, last year, going into the regular season, even into spring training, like I mentioned, we didn't have a center fielder at that point in time that we thought that we could rely on, let alone be, an all-star caliber center fielder. Same with Profar, right? Profar was, battling out for that left field position, and then he had an unbelievable year, especially for his contract value at the time. So I think that's the most immediate question, obviously, just because, like we said, AJ's probably never done. And then I feel like, with the flurry of moves, you mentioned Cease. I think that's a great point. Cease, it feels like now there's a higher chance of him sticking around just based off of what has, happened in the last week or so. Again, always have to say AJ you can never sleep on AJ. He can make it seem like one day he's here for 10 years, and then he might be gone the next, right? And then Robert Suarez, just mentioned him, but I think he's, probably the next biggest trade piece that could potentially be shipped out. Long-winded answer here, but for a long-term question, I think it's, we've been banging this drum, but starting pitching, does it have the depth right now to make a playoff-bound season? Potentially. However, it's kind of a 50-50 for me right now. I feel as if we don't address that issue with starting pitching depth, then I think we could probably have a good chance of falling short this year of getting to October.
It's definitely tough to say now, but I think there are definitely holes in the in the lineup and rotation at the moment. Obviously, we got some of the older guys in like in left field with Jason Hayward, and in the rotation now we've obviously got some big questions that hopefully will be resolved in spring training. I don't think the Padres as a whole really have the money now to make a big acquisition. So I think everything's going to come down to trading. So obviously Dylan Cease and Michael King have both been in big talks at the moment. We don't know what Preller's going to do. He'll pull anything out of the bag when he can. We saw with Cease and with Arias last season. So yeah, long term, I think there probably still will be holes. Tirso Ornelas, of course, I think he's going to come into the lineup this season. He's been, showing his stuff recently, so I'm excited for him. But yeah, coming up to the trade deadline as well, maybe Preller will do something, but at the moment, if he's going to trade anyone, I think it's definitely going to be Cecil King. Hopefully we'll get a big return for that and fill in some spots in the lineup.
For sure. Now, and speaking of the lineup, so in looking and examining the roster, what kind of grading would you give offense for the Padres as it stands right now?
Yeah, I guess based off FanGraphs and really kind of where our depth is overall, we have Arias, Toddy, Merrill, Machado, Cronenworth, Bogarts, Jason Hayward, Elias Diaz, and they have Tirso Ornelas as DH. So who Tom has been banging on that drum. He's, just to give a little bit more context, he's almost 25 years old. We signed him back in 2016 out of a free agent international draft class out of Mexico. So he's almost been in the organization for about 10 years now. Kind of sneaky power, slow development, but towards the tail end of last year and then into winter ball this year, he's been showing that pop. So he has a good kind of sneaky chance of making an impact this year on the roster, especially with left field being such a big gap still. So overall, with the returning pieces, as long as we don't ship anyone else out, grading, I'd probably still give it a B+ at this point in time. You got a Rise that just will be an absolute hit machine. Like we mentioned, if Fernando can stay healthy, he's going to have probably some big power numbers this year. Jackson Merrill just proved day in and day out last year that he was one of the best, grinders for an at-bat in the game. Manny's coming in fully healthy. Crone, Xander is really that big question mark. If we can get 75% of Boston Xander, then I think he definitely elongates this lineup. So I would probably give it a B+ right now in terms of the offense. Not sure about you, Tom.
Yeah, I definitely think like there's been a bit of an overreaction throughout this offseason. Now we have lost guys, but I still think we got some really great core guys. Merrill, Machado, Tatis. I could go on for a bit now, but I definitely think we do have a great squad, great rotation. Bullpen's looking really good, really healthy at the moment, so I'm excited for that. But yeah, I'd probably give us a B. Grading wise, I think again, like I said, holes in lineup, but hopefully we can get that sorted soon. But I think with the core guys, we're still on for a good shot for the playoffs, and if not further.
Yeah, I agree. I had it graded out in my notes as a B plus as well. I think with the offensive core, like you guys mentioned, centered around Jackson Merrill and Fernando, Manny, I think it's going to have a big year. Whenever Manny plays with a chip on his shoulder, he goes absolutely berserk. And I think that having seen what he said, at Padres Fan Fest, where, they're disappointed by, nothing being done really. And I think that that's going to fuel him. I think that with those core guys, it's really going to be a big season offensively for the team. Obviously, with a guy like Arise, we know what he's capable of. I mean, this is a guy who it's not hard to assume that he gets a 4th straight batting title. I'm a very big believer in WAR, but you also have to look at the guy. You have to, run it through the eye test. And while he's not a great runner, he's not a great defender, what he does with the bat, with his bat to ball skills is second to none in the league right now. Like, he brings so much value, and I get it, batting average isn't the end all be all, but what he does, you can almost guarantee he's going to be on base when Fernando and Jackson and Manny come up, because he's that consistent with it. So I've really liked this lineup. I think that there are, obviously, as mentioned before, there are some holes. How does the platoon work between Hayward and Connor Joe? Who fills in that DH spot? Is there a move that AJ does make during spring training? Does a guy like Gavin Sheets step up and kind of grab hold of one of those open spots in the lineup? But I think overall, as mentioned, the core guys really do bring a lot to the table. So I agree. I think that it's a B plus for me when it comes to this Padres offense. Now, when it comes to the pitching side of things, what would you grade it out?
I think you could probably assign 2 separate grades between starting pitching and bullpen at this point when we're recording right now. In terms of a 3-headed monster between Dylan Cease, Michael King, Yu Darvish, that's got to be top 7, top 5 probably in baseball, assuming that Yu Darvish still comes out and acts as ageless as he has. He's approaching his 39-year-old season. There really no signs of him slowing down. Fastball velocity was still way up there, 94, 95, 96 consistently. Michael King, that was, like I mentioned in my bold prediction, of being the Cy Young Award winner this year. And then Dylan Cease, I think he's going to have a huge chip on his shoulder too for how the year ended. He was an absolute dog last year for us in the regular season, and then I think he just ran out of gas in the postseason. So definitely. And then also, really for Cease and King, it's kind of, I know we have King signed on for another year for a mutual option from for $15 million, I believe it is, for the team and the player. Ryan Cohen on our show last week mentioned that there hasn't been a mutual option taken since 2014, I think 2011 or 2014. So it's been over 10 years since that's happened. So it's really a 1-year deal unless we can work out an extension. So theoretically, both of them are on, prove it last year, playing for contract deals. So I think they're going to have huge seasons. Again, like we mentioned before, though, the depth there, 4th and 5th is a huge question mark. We had some injuries last year, missing Joe for the majority, Musgrove for the majority of the year, kind of hurt us a bit. So 3-headed monster, probably B plus overall as a starting staff. I'd probably have to give it a C plus right now, just because it's so top heavy. And right now, guys like Vasquez, Waldron, Hoeing, Brito, they don't really move the needle too much for me. Like I said, Hoeing has the most potential, in my opinion, to really cement himself in that number 4 spot currently with the stuff that he has. But overall, I'd probably give it a C+, just given the depth. As for the bullpen, I think this is probably close to an A-, just in terms of who we have. Again, assuming right now as we're looking at it, no moves are made. You have Robert Suarez closing up shop, Jason Adam, Jeremiah Estrada came on the scene and set the record with 14 straight strikeouts last year in the month of May. Not just for the month of May for 14 straight strikeouts, but set an MLB record with 14 strikeouts in a row, which is obviously nothing that had never been done before. Adrian Morejon is one of the nastiest relief pitchers based off of stuff, whether you're looking at it from standard or advanced metrics. So if he's our 4th guy, Sean Reynolds was an X factor for me. So just kind of running down the depth here. Yuki had a pretty good season overall, especially end of the year, pretty solid. Yuki Matsui, first year from Japan last year. And then Wandy Peralta, you know him very well. He had a very underwhelming season. But if he can get that ground ball rate up, then he has the potential. He's kind of just a throw-in lefty at this point, kind of towards the back end of the bullpen. So for me, bullpen A-, starting pitching probably a C+. So overall, I'd probably give it about a B right now, just because that starting pitching is bringing that down.
I think with Joe Musgrove, just straight off the bat now, if we did have him this season, I'd go with an A- straight away. But those 2 holes in the rotation, they're massive. So I'd probably bang us down to a B-, I'd say, off of initial. But our bullpen's looking great. Hopefully with Robert Suarez, I'm praying now that in this off season he's kind of found his secondary pitch. We all know what his fastball's like. His fastball is absolutely deadly, but it doesn't work 100% of the time. So I think I hope he's gone out and looked for something else. But we've got some really good names out in our bullpen. Estrada, he was lights out at times, obviously a bit inconsistent. But with Jason Adam, like you said, Morejon, he can be nasty at times. Matsui, again, a bit inconsistent, but when he was good, he was a beautiful pitcher. Hoeing was great. So I think with the bullpen I'm happy with, but with the rotation, there's 100% holes. Got those 3 guys. Just what's next after that? Waldron, he's got the knuckleball, but what else does he have? Sometimes the knuckleball's inconsistent. It doesn't work 100% of the time. And then Vasquez, obviously not really 100% starter on the World Series, or looking towards the World Series. But I'd probably give it probably a B-.
Yeah, so I'm right in lockstep with you guys. And I think for the exact reason, like you said, Ryan, I think that, your bullpen is top notch, probably top 3, top 5 in the game right now. Having those questions at the back end of the rotation does bring it down. So I had it as a B as well in my notes. I think that obviously with the dynamic 1-2 punch that you have with King and Cease right now, and then to have Darvish as a number 3 is absolutely crazy to think about it in that context. But, there are questions there at the back end of that rotation. So I agree. I think it brings it down to a B because of how good your bullpen is. It kind of balances each other out. But obviously, as we've seen, you can't overuse the bullpen, and that's where the starting rotation becomes such a big factor. Because you wear down that bullpen early in the season, then you don't have them for that postseason run. So definitely going to be interesting to see, kind of what shakes out for you guys in spring training and what AJ Preller does throughout the course of the season to kind of shore up the back end of that rotation. Now, as we look towards the division in and of itself in 2025, obviously the Pacoda and Fangraphs projections have you guys listed as 3rd in the NL West. Pacoda has you with 83-79 as a record. Fangraphs 82-80. Where do you guys see the Padres finishing in terms of the NL West in 2025?
Yeah, I think from again, having that context of looking at it today, I think third is probably pretty fair, especially given where, we've seen the Diamondbacks make some very, very solid moves this year, getting Corbin Burns in through the door, re-signing Grichuk, making a few others too, to just really, again, not just add to that star player status that they have, but elongate the roster, right? So if you run into a couple injury issues here for the Padres, then you could be looking at some question marks definitely from the depth. So I think that's definitely fair. Last season, up until the trade deadline, we were, pretty much a 500 ball club for most of the year. And then second half of the year, we were on pace for 111 wins if we extrapolated that over a 162 game season. So we ended the year absolutely on fire. So I think it probably has to be somewhere in between. Beginning of last year, we definitely saw some cobwebs there from the 2023 season that, for whatever reason, that team just didn't work out, even though it was probably the most star-studded team that we've had in the last 3-4 years. And it felt like an extension of 23 early into 24 last year. I think when Arise came over, that definitely kind of created a little bit of an X factor for our offense, and then the acquisitions at the trade deadline. So losing Tanner Scott, huge blow. But with that being said, we didn't have Jason Adam or Estrada really come through, or Hoeing or Reynolds really in the ranks in the bullpen last year. So I think that's going to be a huge game changer, especially early on this year. I would say where our roster's at, assuming that we have a relatively healthy rotation, probably could assume anywhere from 85 to 88 wins. I'm a little bit more optimistic than Fangraphs and a couple of the other websites have us at. But I definitely can see, the legitimacy behind those just because of where we're at, definitely from a depth standpoint. And then, if we have 1-2 arms go down in the starting rotation, then that's where it can get real messy. So, but yeah, assuming we have a pretty healthy season, then I could see us anywhere, probably mid to high 80s overall. Again, given that there's no changes to this roster starting on opening day.
I mean, the NL West is obviously a deadly division.
Yep.
As much as I hate to say it, the Dodgers are going to win it. But I think after that, there's definitely going to be a massive race for second place and, of course, the wild card. But I think it was Fangraphs you said 82 and 80. I think that's a bit of a low ball. We know how consistent the Padres can be, but I do think that with the team we got, there have been changes, but not like stupid amount of changes. So I really think, these guys are obviously determined, especially after what happened last season with the playoffs and stuff like that. So, and how close, we did get quite close to winning the NL West in all. Mm-hmm. So I think we do have a really solid shot at second. That's where I'd put ourselves. So, within the division, obviously all that matters is October, hypothetically, as long as you do make the playoffs. But I really think we are going to make second, obviously followed by the Diamondbacks. I think they're obviously competing this season, and the Giants, what they can be like, sneaky. They can really make themselves up there in the division. But I think yeah, those predictions, I think they're a bit of a low ball, and I think we can really go towards being the 90-win team.
So yeah, as far as mine, I do agree. I think that third is probably where you guys will land, just with those questions at the back end of the rotation. But I do have it a little bit higher in terms of my prediction for your win total. I think it's going to be about 86 wins, 87 wins for that team. I think that there's still just too much strength with the lineup that can kind of overcome some of those questions at the back end, because I think there's going to score a lot of runs. And, obviously when you're scoring runs, you kind of overshadow any weaknesses towards the back end of a rotation. And then when you have those three horses at the front end, those are the days where you don't kind of need as much offense, because they're going to be, lights out. And then obviously with the bullpen that you guys have, I think they're going to be able to hold leads for sure. So I think about 86, 87 wins for the Padres, but I think it's, as you guys said, going to be super competitive at the top of that division. So I do think that it probably lands you guys in third right now. Again, assuming no changes are made to this roster between now and opening day.
Very, very helpful too that we do not play in the division as much as we would have a couple years ago. I think if we did, play in the division as much as we did a few years ago, then playing the Dodgers, 15, 18 times versus, closer to around 10, definitely helping us that
Big
way
deal.
as well. And the Diamondbacks and Giants, and those, we cannot write off those pesky Rockies for whatever reason. They play us like they're the Dodgers. So yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons I think I had us a little bit higher than what Fangraphs and others are saying too.
For sure. Yeah, those extra 7-8 games are a big deal per those teams every year. So for sure, that definitely helps kind of even things out a bit more. So as we kind of wrap up here, we want to, go through and kind of base it on the name of the series, the state of the franchise. So looking at the 2025 team, where do you guys see the state of the San Diego Padres?
I would say, overall, eliminating kind of some of the recent inactivity, I'd still say we're in a really good state. With Schilt at the helm, I think he's a massive glue guy just as a manager overall. Really good motivator with his players. You saw that last year, just kind of the shift in chemistry and just kind of the MO of the organization overall, with a pretty similar roster compared to 2023 and the differences between that. The ownership debacle and lawsuit is definitely a distraction overall. So that's really the big question mark that we haven't really addressed too much throughout this episode, but just, an eventual sale. We do have the new control person. The lawsuit, I believe, from what I saw yesterday, based off of some news outlets, is that it got the response from the Seidler brothers, who's getting sued by Sheil Seidler, Peter Seidler's wife, that widowed wife brought about. I think that they extended it for to the end of February, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's still going to get dragged out throughout the year. So as long as the players and the team don't allow that to be too much of a distraction, as tough as that may be, I think we're still in a pretty good state. And again, the huge caveats, said this a few times, but making sure that, if we ship a Cease or a Suarez or an Arise, or a King out the door, then I think that drastically changes our expectations and realistic output and win-loss total throughout the year. So overall, right now, I think we're still in a pretty good spot, as long as we can eliminate the ownership drama, and we keep this roster pretty much intact for what it is right now, and hopefully adding a couple pieces if we can.
I think Ryan made a really good point there with Mike Schilt. I've said this for ages now. I think coaching-wise, we haven't always been amazing, and I think that's been one of our big flaws. I say this in every sport. Coaching is one of the biggest things in what puts a team together. So Schilt's amazing. Ruben Yabler, I cannot praise him enough. He is unbelievable as a pitching coach. Some of the guys that he's turned, Seth Lugo, for example, Michael King, as we've seen. And then obviously we got Victor Rodriguez, our hitting coach, as well. I think he put in a massive shift last season. So I think those guys, the coaching staff, the backroom staff, they're really gonna help us now through the season. And like you saw last season, if we did go through a slump, it wasn't anything crazy, So, and I think that was all down to Mike Schilt. We didn't really see that with Tingler before and Bob Melvin. So I think they're the big guys. So I think we're in a pretty good spot now, as long as, like I've said about 10 times this pod, I think Prella hopefully he can do something now. But I think we're in a really good spot at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, this is a team that is definitely going to be competing for a wild card spot without a doubt in 2025, even with some of the questions that we addressed here. And I agree with you completely, Ryan. I think that if the players can kind of put this ownership debacle, out of their mind so that it doesn't become a distraction all season long, it'll be something that, they'll be able to kind of rally almost against it. similar to kind of feeling like with Major League when they were, rallying as a team against the ownership. And obviously,
it feels like that.
having to battle in that same kind of way. So I think this team really can rally around each other. And I agree with you entirely, Tom. I think that Mike Shildt is one of the more underrated managers in baseball. I think that he really does, he put on a really good display last year of keeping this team together. So I definitely think that the Padres are in a good spot. I think that there are going to be, questions that have to get answered and moves that AJ Preller is going to have to get creative with to be able to make. But I think that for the overall of this team, I do think that they are going to compete for a wild card. I don't think that they're as down and as bad as some of the projection systems have them looking. I do think that they're going to be much more competitive than that. But overall, I think that the Padres are in a good spot. And I think that for sure, this is a team that has some very interesting pieces. And it's one of the teams that I absolutely love watching on a year in and year out basis. I think they have some of the best players in baseball. And I think a big season coming for San Diego, especially, like I said earlier on, Manny to me is going to play with a big chip on his shoulder. Fernando has a lot to prove. And I think that he's going to be able to come out and really put his best foot forward as well. So I definitely think this is a fun season upcoming for San Diego. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in, for jumping on with me here, discussing the state of the San Diego Padres. Let everybody know where they can find you guys at.
Yeah, I mean, we're on all major audio platforms, Spotify, iTunes, but in terms of socials, Twitter or X is definitely our main spot where we've kind of been posting the most since our inception. We're at PadFathers 619, and then we also do have an Instagram as well. Should be posting a little bit more there, but that's also at PadFathers 619 as well. And then Tom is Welsh Fryer, I believe, right? Tom, that's your handle there.
Yeah, that's Welsh Fryer. I'm on Instagram. Obviously, I'm most active on X. Hopefully, going to be running a bit more on my YouTube soon. But yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Yep.
Sure. I want to thank you, Tom, for tuning in, coming in from overseas. No, it's a late night for you over there. So
2 a.m.
I want to say thank you for joining us on here for sure. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks for having us,
on, man.
Absolutely, guys. It's been a fun conversation. So once again, I want to thank the PadFathers for joining us here to discuss the state of the San Diego Padres. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace.